So, hello everyone, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, country focal points for SD6 monitoring. Before we start, I just wanted to show you this icon, which you see also in your view. And here, interpretation. Here you can select the language of the webinar, so French or Spanish, or even English in case we have any interventions in French or Spanish. So please select your preferred language here. And with that, I think we can start. My name is Maria Schade. I work with Hume Water as a global monitoring specialist, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to this webinar. We have primarily invited country monitoring focal points. So both those with an overall responsibility for SD6 monitoring, those that are responsible for a specific indicator, and focal points in the national statistical offices. But we have also received a lot of interest from others. So I know we have a very broad audience here today. It's great to have you here. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. So the UN 2023 Water Conference, which takes place in March next year in New York, it's been dubbed a once-in-a-generation watershed moment. And the conference, it's so special because it's for the first time in a very long time, brings together all the stakeholders, all the players across countries and sectors, and provides a platform where they really can dig into the greatest water and sanitation issues that we're facing today. And the conference also asks all stakeholders to bring voluntary commitments to the table, and we'll hear more about this in a bit. But it's a unique opportunity. And we do think that everyone here today plays a very important role in this process. So many of you are working in national ministries and institutions with water and sanitation issues. Many of you are collecting, compiling data on water and sanitation and reporting on your country's progress towards SD6. So who would know better than you about the situation in your country when it comes to water and sanitation? So where you're doing a good job, where you're lagging behind. Who would know better than you what acceleration that's needed for your country to achieve SD6, and what actions that are needed. So you really have a unique role to play in this very unique event. And that brings us to this webinar and why we're here. So we will start by giving you a brief but comprehensive background to the 2023 Water Conference. We will then look at why it's so important with data and what you can do to engage in this process. And then lastly, we will open up the floor for questions and answers. So you're very welcome to take the floor by raising your hand. We also know that there's a few of you who's already involved in this process. And it would be really great to hear back from you too, how you're doing during the last part. So please raise your hand. And you can, of course, also ask questions in the Q&A through this Q&A function that you see throughout the webinar. And then we come to the objectives of this webinar. So it's the unique opportunity and your unique role. We're trying to combine them. We do this webinar because we want to help start a process where you as focal points can do a number of things. So raise awareness about the conference, to speak with colleagues within and outside of your organization, the general public, about why it's so important. We also hope that you can use your knowledge to encourage politicians and other policymakers to make effective voluntary commitments to accelerate progress. And the hope is, of course, that data can help identify the most effective and efficient actions. And that brings us to the third objective, and it's to create a demand for the use of water and sanitation data for various processes. And with that, I'm handing over to my colleague, Federico Preparatory, who's the Chief Technical Advisor at UN Water, and he will tell you all you need to know about the conference. Over to you, Federico.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. Again, welcome everyone. As Maria says, I'm the Chief Technical Advisor at UN Water. I'm based in Geneva, and it's a real pleasure to join you today for this session. So, if I could ask the help of the slides. Thanks. Okay, great, thanks. So next one, please. Okay, this is a little bit of a history behind this conference and why we really stress how important the conference is. In the United Nations history, so in the last 77 years, there's only been one UN General Assembly conference on water, and that was in 1977 in Argentina, in Mar del Plata. That conference actually lasted for almost 2 weeks. You know, in those days you would go there, you didn't have, you know, emails, etc. So everything happened in person. Since then, there hasn't been another one. There have been at least three water decades since then, but and we have so many meetings happening in the water sector, but there hasn't been another United Nations General Assembly conference on water. Thanks to the current Water Action Decade, 2018-2028, we will have next year in March the midterm review of the Water Action Decade itself, which is also the second ever UN conference, United Nations General Assembly conference on water. Next slide, please. So the conference happens, it starts on World Water Day on 22nd of March, and it's organized over 3 days in New York at the UN headquarters. As I said, it's the midterm comprehensive review of the Water Action Decade. And the key objective, if you look at the General Assembly resolutions, it's to support the achievement of international agreed water-related goals and targets. It's a very broad objective. It's about SDG 6, but it's about all water across the SDGs. Before the conference, there has been a regional preparatory process happening with the 5 regional UN Regional Economic Commissions, and there will be a major milestone coming up next month, which is a meeting convened by the President of the General Assembly on 25th of October in New York. This is a moment where a key decision will be taken on the themes of the 5 interactive dialogues. I will get there in just a few seconds. The President of the General Assembly, who has just taken office, the 77th, it's the President of the 77th General Assembly, also decided that the one-day meeting will be preceded by a one-day stakeholder consultation, again in New York on 24th of October. And right now there is a global stakeholder consultation, online consultation, which is accessible through the conference website. Next slide, please. The conference itself, there are 2 member states who are playing the role of co-hosts. It's a very important role because they really facilitate, you know, all the preparations for the conference. They facilitate exchange among member states. So it's a very important role they have. And they're the Republic of Tajikistan and the Kingdom of the Netherlands. The conference Secretary General, the Secretary General of the conference is the Under Secretary General of UNDESA, the UN Department for Economic and Social Affairs. So there, the Department for Economic and Social Affairs is the secretariat, provides a secretariat for the conference. So they're a key part of the UN Secretariat in New York, of course. There is a website for the conference where you find all information, but very important, and you will hear this a few times in this call, in this webinar. Please, if you haven't done it, sign up to the mailing list, to the newsletter that is regularly shared with all the news about the conference, because it's a key source of information about the conference, how to participate, how to send input. Next, please. As Maria was mentioning, the conference co-hosts have released a vision statement for the conference. So it's their own vision what the conference should achieve. I mean, if you look at the GDA resolution, the output of the conference is a summary of the conference. So there is no negotiated text, but the ambition of the conference is much bigger than that, because it's the second UN conference on water ever, because it's a key moment to bring attention, political attention to the global water crisis. And it's a key moment, it's a key opportunity to take decisions to accelerate progress in the second half of the water action decade and second half of the 2030 agenda until 2030. The vision statement is very clear that the conference co-hosts, they want the conference and the conference process and preparatory process to be very inclusive, cross-sectoral, because it's very well recognized the importance of the other sector in the decision-making process in the water sector itself, and it needs to be action-oriented. So we'll get more into this in a couple of slides. Next one, please. When it comes to how the conference is actually organized, there will be plenary sessions. This is typically where you have member states and major groups, representatives taking the floor and reading the statements. But very important, the conference is organized around 5 interactive dialogues. And the themes of those 5 interactive dialogues are actually right now being discussed. And these are the ones that will be decided on 25th of October. Then there will be special events. Current thinking will be about 4 to 5 special events around the conference, and there will be side events. The special events will be organized by designed by the conference co-hosts and the secretariat, which will call on expertise as necessary. But the side events there will be a call for side events. So this will be a public call for side events, like it's happening in all major UN conferences. And so this will be, all of these that you see on screen it's what's happening around those 3 days. Now, in addition to that, the co-hosts are also discussing with the city of New York to organize a whole water week around the conference. And so there will be other events, cultural events, exhibitions. If you know Mina Guli, she's running 200 marathons during 1 year just to raise attention to the global water crisis. And the last marathon will be in New York around those days. So there is a lot that will happen in New York on that week. Next one, please. Now, what are the themes? There was a global consultation a few months ago happening. You'll find all the results online on the conference website. UNDESA, they've also produced a summary of this global consultation. And the UN Water family, we also produced a technical advice paper to present few options on how these 5 interactive dialogues could be shaped. And the conference co-hosts, based on all of this input, they have now proposed to stakeholders, to the other member states, these 5 things. So there will be water for health, water for development, water for climate resilience and environment, water for cooperation, and the water action decade itself, because the conference is the midterm review of the decade itself. The idea is that if you're familiar with the SDG 6 Global Acceleration Framework, which was launched by the UN system 2 years ago as a conceptual framework to accelerate progress in SDG 6, we say that there are 5 main accelerators, which are finance, governance, capacity, data and information innovation. And so we will find as cross-cutting topics, as cross-cutting accelerators, let's say, across all the interactive dialogues, we will find those 5 accelerators. Next one, please. Okay, what is coming out of the conference? Well, according to the mandate, it's the summary of the conference, and this summary of the conference will be transmitted, let's say, to the 2023 High-Level Political Forum in July 2023, where there will also be the SDG 6 in-depth review. Now, the ambition is, especially coming from the co-hosts, is bigger than that. So what Tajikistan and Netherlands are saying is that as part of the mandate of the conference, there is the possibility for all stakeholders, member states, and all other stakeholders to actually make voluntary commitments. Now at the conference, after the conference, and the body of all these commitments together will be part of, will make really a water action agenda, which will be really this framework that can guide progress in the second half of the decade and second half of the SDGs. And the idea is that the commitments, the actions that will be made, there will be a moment where we can learn, the different stakeholders can learn what works, and what works can be shared and replicated, and this will bring this progress that we need to accelerate between now and 2030. So it will basically create a roadmap, let's say, towards the end of the decade, which is 2028, but also towards the end of the SDGs. I mean, 2023 is the midpoint of the 2030 agenda. We also have other frameworks like the Sendai framework, which are going through the mid-term review of what's happening between now and 2030. So it's a key moment to reflect on what works and to really push to accelerate and replicate and scale up. Next one, please. So the idea of the Water Action Agenda itself was launched by the co-host at the Dushanbe conference in June. And here are some key, let's say, key facts. Water means everything. Okay? It's not just water. It's all water-related topics. It's sanitation. It's water-related disasters. Of course, it's integrated water resources management. It's a short name to mean everything. So let's not focus on the word. It's really mean big water. The intention is to mobilize. The intention is for the Water Action Agenda to be really a unified framework which can really mobilize, inspire action, mobilize actors, and can create a benchmark in a virtuous cycle of acceleration. The good news is that we are not starting from scratch. Already 2 years ago, the UN system launched the Global Acceleration Framework for SDG 6. And this conceptual framework has taken root. It's something which is already being used and which is a broad base on which we can build a water action agenda. Yeah, no, that's fine. Please, next slide. There are three, if we want to kind of simplify like how does it work? How does the water action agenda really work? There are three main building blocks. One is the voluntary commitments. This is the mandated part from the GA resolution. Okay. And so mobilizing voluntary commitments is very important. Okay. The second building block is, well, once a commitment is been made, what happens? It's about implementing the commitments, and it's about sustaining, supporting the implementation of a commitments. It's about scaling up what works. This is another big building block. It's about work, really, rolling sleeves up. It's hands-on work at the country level in most of the cases. The third very important building block is about the follow-up and review. There must be a moment where all stakeholders, first of all, share information, they learn from each other, and so we can see what works, and we can use it again, and we can replicate it, and we can scale it up. We see currently three main tracks for the follow-up and review processes. Please note it's plural. It's not just one process. Okay, it's a very complex, landscape we have. But one track is, the idea would be to have one annual special event on the margins of the high-level political forum in New York. It's at ministerial level, so it's where we interact with the political. The political space. This is about the politics, where we bring really stakeholders there to as a moment to share experiences, to tell us what did they do? Like, okay, you made this commitment. What did you do? What worked? What didn't work? Tell us, because we need to learn. So that's a moment. It's this annual moment to share, and that would be under the UN flag. It's a neutral platform in Europe. Now, the second track, it's about the other sectors. I mean, we know that the decision-making in the water sector are possibly in most of the cases, actually, it's not happening in the water sector itself. If you think about agriculture and the fact that agriculture uses 70% of water withdrawals, what's decided in the Ministry of Agriculture has huge impact on the water sector. So the idea is, for the water action agenda, there would be enough political momentum, enough political visibility to actually really be there in the other sectors, decision-making fora, and have a voice, be there and be part of that decision-making process. The same goes for climate change, for example. Think about the COP processes. How many negotiators are actually talking about water, as part of the solution? And the third track of follow-up and review is actually something we already have. The water sector has many meetings, like annual meetings, biennial meetings, the Chamber Water process, Stockholm Word of the Week, World Water forums. This is a big treasure. Like, it's something which is very valuable because it creates an opportunity for the water community to really come together, exchange ideas, and really develop, common joint messages, which we can bring in the other two tracks that I just mentioned. Next one, please. Okay, so what is the mechanics behind the commitments making? Commitments can be made in different ways, but the central way of making commitments is through the UN Secretariat. So there is an online platform which is called the SDG Acceleration Action Platform, which is already collecting commitments as part of the 2030 agenda, the SDGs. What together with UNDESA, what has been designed together with UNDESA is basically a specific input with respect to the water action agenda, which of course links, and it's completely integrated in the bigger SDG Acceleration Action Plan. So that's certainly a very important way of making commitments. Politicians will possibly, or I hope, make commitments at the conference. That too will be captured by the summary of the conference. But we also have other platforms on which commitments can be made. And so those are very valuable because we can bring them all together. Okay, I'm thinking about, for example, sanitation and water for all, mutual accountability mechanism. It's very important WASH-specific commitments platform. And I want to stress that all commitments from local to global, my individual commitment, me, myself as Federico, as an individual, what do I commit to big institutions, to governments, they're all important because it's all about creating this movement to accelerate progress. Next one. And with this, this slide really, the message is all stakeholders are important. We need everybody, and everybody has a role. So everybody has advantages and comparative advantages with respect to the other ones, but everybody really needs to play their role within, their best, their talents, let's say, what they can bring to the water action agenda. Next one. So we put this slide just to try, after all this presentation, like to give you some key take-home messages on why the conference is so important. Okay. It's a very inclusive process. The way UN conferences are organized now, it's very inclusive. There is really space not only for the member states, but also for the other stakeholders, for civil society, for the major groups, for the business, private sector entities. Everybody, can speak. Everybody has a role to play at the conference. It will happen over 3 days, which is, which is great because the last time we had an SDG 6 the SDG 6 in-depth review in New York, it was only over 3 hours. So this time we have 3 full days, and it will happen, you know, with the plenaries, the parallel interactive dialogue sessions, the side events. So there will be plenty of opportunities to discuss about everything important under the water, under the water sky. It is a unique opportunity, also political opportunity to really bring the attention to the water challenges and solutions, and to really try and maintain even afterwards the momentum, this political momentum, because what happens after the conference is equally important as what is actually happening now at the conference. And what we want, I mean, we know that from the past, we know that from experience, from case studies, the magic ingredient for success, for acceleration is political leadership. So this is why the conference is so important, because it brings the water challenges and solutions to the attention of the political leaders. Next one. So with this, I would like to thank you for your attention, but also I would like to stress again, please have a look at the conference website. Even if you Google it, UN 2023 Water Conference, you find it immediately. But very important, if not done so, please do it now. Just sign up to the mailing list. It's the main channel, main avenue to receive all the information related to the conference. Thank you very much. Handing over back to my colleagues.
Thanks, Federico. And I'm guessing that you have a lot of questions. Please stay on. Please note them down, and we will get back to them in a bit. But first, we will hear from my colleague Will, who will tell us why the data is so important, and propose some steps on how you can get engaged in the process. Over to you, Will.
Thanks, Maria. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's really great to see so many people here. I think it's been 6 months actually since I've seen a lot of you. Recognize a lot of the names here who participated in the second global workshop of SDG 6 monitoring that we had back in February. So this is kind of a continuation of the outreach that we're doing in the Integrated Monitoring Initiative. But this is a very special one because we really want to get the SDG 6 monitoring focal points interested and involved in this 2023 water conference. My name is Will Reedhead. I'm the coordinator of the UN Water Integrated Monitoring Initiative for SDG 6, based at the UN Water Secretariat near Geneva. And I'm happy to be with you here today. This presentation, as Maria said, is following now. We're going to shift the gear a little bit to talk about now what the Integrated Monitoring Initiative can do to support the conference, and in particular, what you, who are the focal points in your countries, what role you could have in supporting this conference. And I'll give you the answer now. Your role is really, really important. You folks, you're the first line of attack, of implementation in your countries for the water and sanitation agenda. You're the ones who really know what the issues are. You're the ones who have access to the ground, and you're the ones who have the access to the data. So really, there's no one better than you to be able to drive interest in this conference, which I hope you saw from Federico's presentation. This conference is really a once-in-a-generation opportunity to put the delivery of SDG 6 on steroids. And I think that you, as the SDG 6 monitoring focal points in your countries, have a really unique position to be able to support and to drive this in your countries. And I hope that you will do that. And so what I'm going to show you in this presentation is kind of, what the opportunity is and what we would like to see that you could do in your countries. Okay, I'm just trying to change my own slide here. Okay. So I'm going to take a step back and talk a little bit again about the stuff that you already know about SDG 6 monitoring. The first thing is that we know that data are important. Why are they important? This slide kind of summarizes the main points. With data, we are able to identify and quantify what the needs are for delivering the SDG 6 targets in our countries. We can use those data to prioritize our efforts. We can use those data to make a case to our bosses and to our finance departments to invest in our work. And of course, data is key to ensuring accountability and transparency amongst all the policy that's going on. On the implementation side, data can help us identify what are the best practices, so we can scale those things up. Of course, the whole idea of integrating across SDG 6 is really core to us, and it's just one of the fundamental values of the Integrated Monitoring Initiative. And that lets us maximize the synergies across the goal and to mitigate trade-offs across different interventions. So that's why data and evidence are important in general, but specifically for the 2023 Water Conference, data is important in a number of ways. The first one is that we can use these to look at the big picture for SDG 6 in our countries and to prioritize what are those main needs. I mean, we know based on the data which targets are being delivered and which ones are really are far behind. So we can use those data to make an argument to our bosses that we need to do more in the following ways. As I mentioned, best practices. They can be used to identify what's working real well in our countries, and we can propose to our bosses that they replicate and scale those things up. And following those two things, the needs and the best practices, this can feed into what Federico was talking about as these voluntary commitments for at the Water Conference. So using this data, you folks can formulate, propose voluntary commitments and try to sell them to your bosses to make those commitments at the conference. Once those commitments are made, the more that they are based on data, the better it is for the eventual follow-up and review, right? So if we're setting what we call SMART objectives, they're much easier to track their delivery over time. And then finally, I just want to note that we already have language. These SDG global indicators are language that are formally adopted by member states as part of the 2030 agenda. So if we're speaking with that language, we already have that political commitment from our bosses. So it's that much easier for us to make these arguments. You know where the data are, but here's just a reminder. So at the global level, we've been collecting data on all the SDG global indicators, and those values can be found on the UN Statistics Division website at that link there that you see. The SDG 6 global indicators, of course, that's the focus of the Integrated Monitoring Initiative, and you can find that on the data portal, which you all know about. And likewise, there are other water and sanitation indicators which aren't strictly the 11 global indicators, but are also very relevant and can be found on different global platforms. There are data additionally that are available that are not reported by the countries, but are from other data sources. For example, Earth observation data or data from the international donor community. Those are things that we can consider when we make our arguments to our bosses. And then, of course, there's also a whole range of very detailed project level data from many different sources. And one good source for that is this World Bank Water Data Portal, which the link is there. So that's global level data. But at the national level, you have even higher resolution information for all sorts of different things related to water and sanitation and the hydrological cycle. You've got data that's with the different line ministries and institutions. You have data at the subnational level, so you're talking about provinces and districts. You have data from utilities and service providers, and you have data from other sources like academia, the private sector, and civil society. That's water and sanitation data, but of course, we care about more than just SDG 6, as Federico was mentioning. So there's also, you have lots of other environmental, economic, and social data that might be relevant. And it's worth noting, of course, that there's a very important role to be played by your national statistics offices. Now at this time, I'd like to say a couple of words about what these voluntary commitments actually look like. And the short answer is there is no real definition of what a commitment is. In my opinion, the more specific and precise and data-oriented that they can be, the more compelling they are and the easier they are to follow up on. But there's really no right or wrong way to articulate them. But here you see two examples. One is a kind of a smaller scale commitment. So here it's saying that by 2025, a particular district will rebuild 5 wastewater treatment plants to achieve tertiary treatment with the intention of improving water quality in the Gray River. Okay, so it mentions 5 plants. It mentions generally improving water quality, although it doesn't say by how much, and it mentions a specific place. Okay, so that's a good commitment. But here's another, the second one is a lot larger, and it's a national level commitment. So by 2030, country Y will invest $20 billion for new wastewater treatment plants to decrease the country's proportion of untreated wastewater released into the environment from 70% to 35%. Okay, so obviously that's a big one, $20 billion will buy you quite a bit of wastewater treatment. But what I like about this one is that it specifically references one of the global indicators. That's indicator 631 on wastewater treatment, with a target of reducing it from 70% to 35%. This would have been informed by data that you have on indicator 631. Just an idea of what these commitments might look like. I don't know whether this seems like a new or intimidating thing to be trying to drive our bosses and these global policymakers who are going to be in New York to make these commitments on the global stage, but I don't think it's actually that foreign. You've been doing things like this already. In particular, I want to draw your attention to the voluntary national reviews, which is something that almost all countries have done already at least once. And as part of the Agenda 2030, your countries are encouraged to do it every 4 years or so. But this VNR process basically is collecting data across all of the SDGs and feeding them into a national report with multiple stakeholders. And I imagine many of you have been involved in the VNRs on the water side already. But this is a very similar process, what we're talking about for the global conference, where you want to take the data that you have and get the word out to your bosses in your ministries, and then higher up to the delegations that are going to the conference. In this case, about what your country can do to deliver SDG 6 through these voluntary commitments. So that's an existing national level process, but global process, but at the national and subnational level, you also have processes in place that are using data. I would refer you to joint sector reviews, for example. There are also national water and sanitation policies and strategies and annual work planning and budgetary processes for water and sanitation. That's all based on data. National target setting against the SDG 6 targets, that's based on data too. So what we're suggesting that you do in support of the conference is actually building on things that you're probably already doing at different levels in your countries. So this brings me then to kind of what our ask is to you as monitoring focal points. And there's kind of 5 steps that we might suggest that you consider. The first one is, in the context of the 2023 conference, you should find out who is actually leading the delegation. Normally, this is through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but it could be other ministries. There'll be someone there who has already heard about this conference and is maybe planning to attend the meeting in New York, who will be basically the lead on everything for the conference, the head of the delegation, and that would be the person who would be most likely making these voluntary commitments. Okay, so you want to figure out who those people are. The second thing you want to do is within your own ministry and institutions, get the word out about the conference. You want to create demand amongst your peers and your immediate bosses, get them excited about this conference, because really this is a great opportunity. You're probably used to incremental policy processes in your countries where it takes a long time to bring about the change you want, and you have to go through lots of hurdles to get the budget that you need. If you can inspire these head of delegation to make a high-level commitment, on a public global platform, that's going to really fast track your work in your country. So talk to your colleagues, get them excited about the conference. Third thing is get your technical counterparts together and talk about what the data says. Some of your countries have teams for specific indicators, or maybe an intersectoral monitoring team. Bring them together, talk about the data, see where the gaps are, see where the best practices are, the scalable solutions, and formulate, on your part, formulate draft voluntary commitments. And then step 4 is go back to these conference representatives and tell them the idea, propose these voluntary commitments to them, and see if they're interested and want to take this forward to New York. And finally, just saying that it goes beyond your ministry. You can get the word out to other stakeholders, because it's not just about government commitments, but civil society and private sector, they can also make voluntary commitments. So, as monitoring focal points, you're really in a position to get the word out to a lot of people. This slide is just reminding us that we're used to wearing hats as monitoring experts, but we also have to become communications experts, because what we ultimately want to do is raise someone's awareness and change their behavior. We want them to do a particular thing, which is to make a voluntary commitment at the conference in New York in March. So we need to actually approach them, following good communications practices. Okay, so this slide here is reminding you of some of the good practices about communications. If you attended the global workshop in kickoff in December, and then the discussions in February, you'll have heard some good communications practices, and I encourage you to go back to the workshop report and the workshop recordings if you want to be refreshed on this. But just a reminder that getting the word out to these audiences is a communications undertaking. And then finally, just a reminder, this is going back to the objective that Maria shared at the beginning. So basically, what we would like to see is that you, the national focal points for SH6 monitoring, that you can do these following things. And it's kind of like a ladder. So the first rung of the ladder is just raising awareness and building interest amongst key stakeholders about the conference. The more interest there is, the more excited people are about this conference, the more effective the conference will be. Okay, that's just awareness. The second thing is about these commitments. So if we're successful, we can encourage politicians to make commitments to the conference, which, as I mentioned, will really fast track the delivery of SDG 6 in your countries. So get those commitments going. That can be done without data, actually. It's not best practice, but there are a lot of ways that you can still make a well-intentioned commitment in New York without actually having data behind it. But for the reasons that I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, having an evidence-based commitment is really the gold standard. So that's the third thing here, is to create demand for the use of national water and sanitation data for these commitments, but also more broadly for other policy processes that you're involved in. This is an opportunity for the monitoring initiative to show the world what we're doing with our data and create demand for that data. And that's all I'm going to say now. I hope that it's inspired you to get out there and play this advocacy role in getting the data into this conference process. Here are just a few links. The first two are about the Integrated Monitoring Initiative website and the data portal. I think you're familiar with both of these already. And the last two are the links that Federico Maria already mentioned for the conference website and for the conference mailing list. Thanks for your attention, and I'll give the floor back to Maria. Thank you.
Thanks, Will. And now we move into the third part of this webinar, which is the questions and answers. And I hope to see a lot of raised hands. If you have a question, please feel free to raise your hand and we will give you the floor. I also know that we have some people here who's already participating in this process in their countries, so it would be really great to hear from you too. So please feel free to raise your hands. So I thought we would start with a question from a written question though, from Mark Bannister from South Africa. And he's wondering about the process for registering for the conference. So which depends on what hat you're wearing. And I guess, so I was hoping to give the floor to Federico. Is that okay? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Maria, and thanks so much for the question. So it is a United Nations conference. That means, of course, for member states, it is a member state conference. So member states will indicate the delegations to the conference. As Will was saying, usually it's the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that actually drives the process, but depends. There's so many different ways of doing this. But anyway, there will be a list of people who are part of the member state delegation. Then for non-member state entities, there is an accreditation process, it's called. And the first round of accreditation has already happened. And already 400 organizations have already been accredited, more than 400. And there will be another round of accreditation from 31st of October to 2nd of December. So this is the process to get accredited to the conference, which means to be able to basically physically access the conference. Then, of course, I imagine, I mean, this hasn't been completely decided, but usually these days, I mean, everything will be broadcast. The UN Web TV will probably broadcast it for the main conference, possibly, everything else, the special forums, the side events. So this is still a possibility, and many of the meetings may happen. I mean, especially the preparatory meetings may happen in a hybrid format as well. Thank you. Hope this clarifies. Thanks.
And I hope that also responds to the question from Erin Huber, a written one, but we can also respond to you in written. We have one person who wants to take the floor. Nesbet Sirihuro. I'm apologizing for my pronunciation of your name. Would you want to take the floor?
Sure, thank you.
And before you start, sorry, if you could just briefly introduce yourself. Thanks. Where are you coming from?
Yeah, thank you so much for organizing this webinar. Shiriguru Nesbet is my name, with the Department of Water, Sanitation and Hygiene Coordination in Zimbabwe. We are responsible for coordination in the wash sector, and I've just three quick questions. One would be the level of the delegation that is expected at the conference. Is it supposed to be led by the head of state? Is there a limit on the numbers that nation state delegations can bring to this conference? The second question will relate to invitations. I've already heard that accreditation has already been done, but have these invitations been sent to the respective nation states? Lastly, but not least, the country preparatory processes, like the voluntary reviews, the idea of making the voluntary commitments. Do we have dedicated focal persons for different countries or for different regions that we can make use of? I submit.
Thanks. And I think you're asking questions that a lot of people are wondering about, and I'm hoping that Federico can answer them, or at least give a start.
Yeah, no, I'll certainly try. So for the invitations, the UN, the United Nations Secretary General will send invitations to all heads of state. But I understand that common practice, this would happen only after the preparatory meeting, which is on 25th of October. However, meanwhile, the conference secretary general, the UNDESA, will send a save the date, is sending out a save the date to all the missions, the permanent representatives in New York. So, okay, so that means the invitation goes to the heads of state, then it will be up to the head of state to decide and to the cabinets to decide the level of representation at the conference. And the number of people per delegation, to be honest with you, it hasn't been discussed yet, but it will be driven by the room capacity. It's really be driven by the capacity of the UN Secretariat, meeting room facilities. It's an excellent question about the preparatory process for the voluntary commitments, and this, I think, it's something that it will happen in different ways. Okay, so going to the water meetings, I've already heard colleagues' ideas on how this could happen. For example, I was talking with a colleague from one ministry in one country, and saying, look, we need to undertake a major sector reform in our country, and actually this could be an excellent opportunity to use the conference, like to put this as a voluntary commitment from our country. Then the key here is also to work in partnerships, to build at the national level, to meet with other actors who are working together with you and say, look, there is an opportunity to fill a gap. Like we have a challenge, we know what to do. There is an opportunity to put this up, visible, to make it very visible. And we also are working. We from the UN system side, we really want to support and sustain, the delivery of the implementation of commitments at the country level. That's why we think, for example, the role of the UN country teams. So the agencies which are already working in many countries, and they're really very familiar with the country-specific challenges. They already have programs, projects happening. That they can also, we think, of course, they're a great resource to support this process. Then, as I was saying, there are processes which are already happening. They've been happening for many years. For example, through the Sanitation Water for All Partnership, there's been a process which has gone on for 10 years, and also linking up to processes which are already happening. It helps, because there's no need to reinvent anything. It's just there's just an opportunity, a political opportunity to just bring all of this together in the UN conference, to bring it, make it very visible, and so that then we can build on this political momentum in all the years moving forward. I want to highlight one comment, one post in the chat from my colleague Fiona from Glass, because it's very important. So these links with what Will was saying. It's very useful to link to the evidence. Like, you have the data, and so any commitment which will build on that and say, look, here is the problem, and we can prove it. This is the data. And this is what the solution we think it should be, and we package this as a commitment. And then, of course, it's about finding the resources, right? Having the resources to deliver. You may need additional capacity, and also, from the UN system side, we have the SDG 6 capacity development initiative, which is just now reaching out to the country level. Will be a discussion also about financing. Together with OECD, we will be hosting a roundtable on financing water in February, to bring all the financing actors together to really think what is a commitment from the financing point of view. In general, conceptually, we're really using the global acceleration framework accelerators as a guidance. So we need governance, we need capacity, we need the data, we need innovation, and all of this, we need all of this together. Thanks.
Thanks, Federico. And I guess the bottom line is that there's no standardized national process. And I think that's why we have this webinar, and why we encourage you to, as soon as possible, find out who's leading the process in your country. So we have a question from the floor from Renaud Coniket. I will give you the floor.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, hello.
Yes. Yeah, hello. So I had a question. I'm working at the Biodiversity and Water Service from the French Ministry from the Environment. So I had actually two questions. The first one would be about the preparatory meeting. I think you mentioned on the 25th of October. So what will we address? What would be the main themes, and what is it to expect from the stakeholder consultation, I think on the day before? And the second question would be about the type of the differences that they could be between the type of review and follow-up between, on the one hand, the commitments made by member states and the voluntary commitments made by different stakeholders. Is the review and follow-up going to be the same? Are they going to be different ways of interpreting them and addressing them? Thank you.
Thanks. And I will hand over to you again, Federico.
Yeah, thank you. Many thanks for the questions, of course. On 25th of October, the objective is to reach consensus on the 5 things for the 5 interactive dialogues. So the main agenda item is discussing the 5 themes proposed by Tajikistan and the Netherlands, and reach consensus among the member states. The stakeholder consultation, the online consultation, which is happening now, and then on 24th of October, it is a way for member states to also hear, the views of the other stakeholders. So this is, in essence, what's going to happen between now and 25th of October. Now, the follow-up and review process. First of all, it's really not an accountability mechanism. Right? So let's be very clear. It's not, monitoring and accountability. It is a benchmarking virtuous cycle where the different actors and stakeholders they learn from each other, and they can really they have a stage, a visible political stage, where they can present what we've done. They can tell everybody what worked, what didn't work, and also they can continue this process. So this is what this is the idea, the main idea behind the one annual special event happening on the margins of the high-level political forum. Now, there will be other platforms. Think about the business community. Okay, the business community will be using other channels to look at, among their peers, to look at the commitments. Think about what the World Business Council for Sustainable Development is one platform. The World Economic Forum itself is another platform. Of course, everything that's happening in the UN Global Competence, specifically with our colleagues at the CEO Water mandate. So that too is a follow-up and review platform. What's important is that all this political attention that it's being built and will be there on 22nd of March. We need to find a way to maintain this political momentum after the conference and in all the years between now and 2030. Thanks.
Thanks. So we're running out of time, but we would really much like to get to the last people with a raised hand. So please bear with us as we use a few more minutes of your valuable time. I would like to give the floor to Ernst Überreiter from Austria.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Yes, I'm Ernst Überreiter. I'm SG6 focal point in Austria, and I'm in the ministry responsible for water management. We're in close contact with our Ministry of Foreign Affairs in preparation of the conference, and we are hoping to send our highest level possible representative from Austria to the conference next year. The first question I have is where and how can side events be proposed? We are interested to do one. And the second question is also on the commitments. We are now talking about the level the commitment should cover, and this very much depends also on the reporting process. It was already tried to give an answer, to be given an answer, but if there's really a regular reporting afterwards and which is very intensive, and maybe UN Water follow-up of the process of the reporting, then we would have to rethink the commitment in another way. So the level of the commitment is now which we are not really have a clear view on. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks much for that. And I'll give the floor again to Federico.
Yeah, thanks. I think the last part it's really, I would like to focus on the last part. Currently, I mean, as part of the UN of the UN conference, and as part of it, the voluntary commitments are mandated by the GA resolution, the modalities resolution. They're voluntary, okay? So, and the UN Secretariat, because this is a UN conference, will keep track of all the commitments. Now, there won't be any hard, regular reporting required about the commitments. That's not within the mandate of the conference. What current thinking is that we have also seen how useful, for example, the HLPF, the high-level political forums process of the voluntary national reviews, it is to bring certain topics to up on the political agenda. So I think it would be something similar. So you would have an opportunity to voluntarily report on your commitments, and this could happen, at a special event at HLPF. It could happen in other fora as well. For example, if your commitment is about climate, maybe COP is certainly a better place, right, to go there and talk about it. The climate change COP, or if it's about nature conservation, there are other, very, very, very established, intergovernmental processes for that. So why don't we bring it there too? So this is the idea to really maintain, to bring it all together in a water action agenda, and then afterwards to be able, thanks to this package, to this wrapping, let's say, to bring it forward and can maintain the momentum. On the side events, on the question on the side events, there will be a call for side events. So DESA will circulate the call for side events, and well, this will come.
Thanks. That's great. So I think this takes us to the end of the webinar. I'm used to say that we're noting a lot of questions in the Q&A about the accreditation process. We won't get to them, but if you send that question to monitoring@unwater.org, we will make sure to forward it to the right person to get a proper response to those questions. So don't worry that we're not speaking about it now. We will help you find the answers. And just to wrap this up, so this conference, as we've heard, it's a unique opportunity for water and sanitation in the world. You, as monitoring focal points for SDG6, you really have a key role to play in this. You can point out to your policy and decision makers where the needs are, what needs to be done to achieve SDG6 in your countries, what commitments are needed. And given that this conference has such a high political status, it's very likely that your leaders also will be very interested in listening to you. So it's really a win-win situation. And we hope that this webinar has provided you with a few concrete ideas on the next steps and how to get involved. So speak with everyone about it, raise awareness. find out who's the main conference focal point in your country. It may very well be someone in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but it could also be someone else. If you have problems with this, you can also try to contact us to see if we can help. Think about what you need these people to know, tell them to them in a way that makes it easy for them to understand and act on it. And encourage everyone, high and low, private, public sectors, to make commitments to drive progress towards SDG6 and the larger water goal. And from our side, we're of course very happy to guide you in this process. If you have any questions, as I said, please reach out to us on monitoring@unwater.org. We would also be very happy to hear back from you, how you're doing. Like once you've started the process, I'm sure there's a lot to learn and that we can also share within this network of focal points. So please stay in touch. And then from the perspective of the integrated monitoring initiative, we will definitely stay in touch with you as next year. It's the big conference year, but it's also the third phase of the initiative. And we're going to focus increasingly on the use of data. And next year, it's also the launch of the third global round of data collection on the SDG6 indicators. So there's a lot of things coming up. And with that, thank you so much and have a nice rest of the day. And the webinar is now closed.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks.